With that, I'd like to call to order the February 28th Ordinance Committee meeting. We're going to take attendance. Maybe Tracy, you could help me with that. Thanks.
Councillor Johnson,
Here.
Councillor Katarina,
Terry, are you here?
Who?
You're doing the roll call. Can you respond to?
Councillor
Yes, I'm here.
Homo.
Here.
Thank you.
We get warmed up after a couple of minutes. So thanks. Welcome, everybody. We've got a pretty full agenda this evening. I'd like to begin with the approval of minutes from the January 2022 meeting.
Moved.
Okay, can I have a second?
Second.
Tracy, can we have the vote on it, please? Thanks.
Councillor Johnson,
Yes.
Councillor Katarina,
Yes.
Homo.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. We've got three items for business this evening. Discussion of Chapter 1007 Cable TV Ordinance, discussion of Chapter 405, the zoning ordinance on manufactured housing, and some revisions for that, Chapter 500. And we have folks here from Hillcrest this evening who will welcome to join us at some point for public comment on the item. And then finally, preliminary discussion on our progress with electric vehicle charging stations. So are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll press on with the cable TV ordinance. And I want to begin by saying, I don't recall really recently having seen anything on cable TV. So I don't know whether I have the wrong channel or whether we're not.
No, I think this is, we're really starting the public phase of the discussion right here. I'll just provide some background. Many municipalities find themselves with a terribly outdated or antiquated cable franchise agreement. Many of these date back into the 80s and even some earlier. Phil can probably speak to other municipal clients. And so many of us have recognized the need to modernize those franchise agreements. There's now successor organizations that aren't even acknowledged in these documents to begin with. Not to mention just the change in technology. The sorts of things that cable providers provide today are far different than they did 10, much less 20 or 30 years ago. So to that end, we approached GPCOG and with a similar problem. And the solution was to kind of marshal our resources, if you will, and on GPCOG, on behalf of member communities, those that wish to participate, chose to kind of fund a law firm to assist us in this effort. And that the consortium of communities, there was about 14 or 15 in total, I think. The firm is out of the upper Midwest somewhere, Bradley Law. I know Phil had the chance to review some of the work that they've produced and perhaps can speak to it if you wish. But essentially, they highly recommend that we all modernize our cable ordinances first. That's kind of a backdrop, or if not a necessary prerequisite for the franchise agreement. So first step, and that's what's in front of you this evening, is to modernize our ordinance, which would be the first step toward sitting down. And the intention is to kind of collectively renegotiate. We think there's good leverage and position to negotiate as a consortium. So all of us are trying to move this through our legislative bodies in the first quarter of this year, ideally. I'm not sure if we'll all make that deadline. So what you have before you is a memorandum from Bradley Law that helped lay out some of the background and the impetus for this effort. And then the actual text of a full-blown, would be a repeal and replacement ordinance, which I did have Phil look at a couple months back, and he's certainly free to speak to that if you wish. So we'd like to initiate that with the ordinance committee and ultimately, take the time necessary to work through the document, understand it, get comfortable, and ideally have council consider it thereafter.
Great. Thanks, Tom, and thanks for the pre-work on this. So I'd like to ask the committee, how do you feel about the process we should follow in beginning to wade into this issue?
I think I'd like have Phil follow up with Tom's comments just to give, I think, him lead the way. He's the expert with some of this. I read it. I don't see anything that is.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know enough about it that I'd rather hear from the attorney, find out thoughts. So
Great. Well, I'd like to thank the folks in Minnesota who drafted this, because I was thinking for a moment, maybe they were like Charles Dickens, who got paid by the word, they were getting paid by the page. So, but it was certainly it's a robust document. So Phil, maybe you can help us
Thank you.
find a path through it, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I agree, it's very robust.
That's the word I was looking for.
But I did have, I did have a chance to review it. Tom has to review it, obviously not to reinvent the wheel. It was an effort on behalf of a number of communities to hire a group that does specialize in this kind of work. I didn't find anything wrong with it, other than a few minor edits that I sent to Tom. There was a reference, one or two references that needed to be updated. And it was, I think there was a notice requirement that I found that needed to be tweaked. Essentially what it does is under both state and federal law for that matter, but there's a state law provision that allows us to charge fees, enter into a franchise agreement with the cable companies, but a prerequisite, as Tom mentioned, is to have an ordinance in place. That's simply what it says. And then there's a number of statutory requirements that franchise agreement would have to have in it. So what this does, it essentially takes the statute for all intents and purposes and puts it in the ordinance. So there are a number of requirements. There's consumer protection laws, refund issues and things like that. It's very specific, and what I did is I just went through and double checked all the references, all the requirements, and I found that it complied. So it is very extensive. It will be, I think, the most extensive ordinance in the state of this type, but it's an effort that was put together by these communities. I think it's a good one. I have not heard at this point, and Tom may actually have more info on this, where the other communities are with this. I haven't been asked yet on behalf of any of our other clients to review it. So it would be interesting if others have found other issues, or other communities that may have a different council found other issues. But at this point, from my perspective, it does comply with the statute, and it's essentially good to go.
Great.
As
So
written.
I had some questions for you, but I'd like to turn to my fellow committee folks and see, if they have any questions I'd like to ask, and then maybe you could kind of walk us through at least the body of the document to kind of show us what it is. I mean, it's 30+ pages, so it's got to be one of the longer ordinances, right? I would think that we have. So, but I had a couple questions, but Jean Marie and Paul, if you would like to lead off with any questions you might have, and then I save mine for the end after you two go.
Yeah, if I could start, Mr. Chair, that's all right. Phil, my question on this is, it's 30 pages, which is like crazy. This is, to me, is almost more like an agreement that you have with the franchise operator than an ordinance, sort of, but I don't know. I'll leave that to you. Would this be good for any cable operator who comes into town? Because I think we're going to end up at some point, with more than one, potentially, the way, technology's going and whatnot.
It is, yeah. So it's designed to apply to it's an ordinance of general applicability. You're right, though, that it is as long as essentially an agreement would look like, but there is a separate document, the franchise agreement, that you would actually enter into, and that agreement has to comply with the ordinance.
Okay,
so the way this is drafted, it essentially provides a roadmap. Although one thing I would say is that there is a model franchise agreement now that the state has drafted, the state agency has drafted. This is the Connect Me Authority or the Connect Me Authority. So there is this model ordinance, agreement that we have reviewed, also have reviewed in other contexts, and it certainly is a good ordinance. The industry has also reviewed it. They sometimes agree with it, sometimes they don't agree with it. But what this does, and I also did review it against that model ordinance, it essentially codifies the requirements that needs to be in the agreement.
Okay.
So I guess what I don't think I think this is a very good ordinance, and I think it's as if all the communities adopt, I think it's a good thing. Do you need this amount of detail? Probably not. But I don't think it's worth going and rewriting in any way. It's sufficient. It's very comprehensive, as you noted. But I think what you're getting at is, do you need it all in there? I don't think you do need it on there, but you have it now, and so you might as well. It provides good guidance essentially from the statute.
I think the drafting strategy there is that it's comprehensive, and that will help presumably provide rationale for what we're seeking. And it's probably a pretty good blueprint of what the franchise agreement will require. We'll say we have ordinances, here they are. This is why we insist on this provision in the agreement.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. And, you know, if the attorney feels that this is good and it doesn't, you know, conflict with anything, then it's okay by me. I mean, you know me, I'm not gonna dig into all the details of it. That's why I have an attorney. But I agree that you want it to be as broad as possible, but as complete as possible too, to meet any, you know, changes and that's coming down the line with technology, because I mean, what we've got now is so outdated, it's not funny. We and everyone else, so.
Okay.
I just want to ask you a question. I'm embarrassed I don't know the answer, but that's fine. I think we all might learn something here. In my professional experience, the expectation is that there's some exclusivity that comes in exchange for franchise. We will grant you franchise, exclusive in most cases, in exchange for all sorts of things. That made sense when they were building out infrastructure in the first instance, because there was a huge financial commitment. You know, that infrastructure exists largely intact from the original, I'm sure upgraded. Though there are a lot of other providers that are now entering the sphere, but not arguably as comprehensively, from cable to broadband to phone for that matter. So Phil, will this franchise agreement be exclusive to one provider and one only, or is there room for other providers to have a piece of one part of it?
It's explicitly non-exclusive in the ordinance. Now,
Okay.
practically speaking, it's typically one, right, or two. But it's not written in a way that you're providing exclusive, and I just found the provision, but it specifically says the franchise shall be non-exclusive. So in theory, you could have multiple.
Which I think in this day and age makes sense. There's probably 5 or 6 or a dozen different
Right.
providers that potentially are in this environment.
That's right. Yeah. Now, each of those providers would have to comply. So there's different requirements, for example, providing what a lot of people are familiar with, municipal cable agreement, which is the public access channel, right? So those are required, the PEG channels, they call them. So that would be along with multiple, I don't know exactly how that would work if you have multiple providers, but that is a requirement if you enter into one. So, but it's non-exclusive.
Paul, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I did.
Comments?
So the end game here is to have 14 of us, approximately 15 of us, to have essentially adopt the same ordinance with the exact same language, right? And so we're all going to give our feedback, and then GP cog would take that feedback and come back with a revised one, or we could.
I think it's up to each community to adopt what it's comfortable with. I think the intent is to have us ideally be fairly close, so we can then negotiate as a group.
Yeah.
I suspect, I'm hoping that the changes among those communities will not be so grand that we still, you know, that we're not going to be able to negotiate collectively. So we're all, and to answer the question asked earlier, I think a couple of communities have actually adopted. Most of the rest are kind of in the same position, same timing, moving this through.
And Phil, do you know which ones you represent, and if you
I
would?
don't off the top of my head who are in this group.
But
I don't know who's in the group.
your firm hasn't. This is.
I no, they haven't, and I checked with my colleagues who are sort of the lead for other towns, and they hadn't seen it yet.
Okay.
Well, if you do review it for them, can you reduce our bills? Since
Yeah, proportional.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had a couple of questions I'd like to run through. So, and if I'm gonna, rewinding on this, please forgive me, but it did occur to me that it seems like there would be a need, a cause for why this was developed. So was there anything that we're anticipating either regionally or in the town that we're anticipating that was the motivator for this? I mean, or someone just said one day, I've been thinking about cable TV and I really think we need a new ordinance, so I don't.
It really has to do with the antiquated nature of the franchise agreement.
Okay.
That's what we're all accustomed to. That produces fairly significant revenue for us every year,
Okay.
$250,000 or so. And that varies community by community. So I think that's the piece that everyone acknowledged was outdated. And then we learned that really to get to that, we need to create a new ordinance that has modern terms that comply with a lot of the technology and state law and federal law changes.
Well, I know there's interest in communications. I know Ken Johnson has expressed interest in trying to get some programming and use that as a channel for communication. So, so I know, I've heard that. but we don't have anything currently active, currently broadcasting other than a test pattern or something like that.
Well, currently we have the so-called PEG channels, the public access education and government, I think is PEG is the acronym.
It's education and government, that's right.
Just for instance, one of the things Spectrum did to us without our consent is they moved those to 1300 on the dial, which I think caught the attention of a lot of folks that are frequent watchers, and we were able to move those back down to the lower end of the spectrum. They're channels 2 and 3, I think it is. So that's just a small example. So those have existed. We would fully expect those to continue to be in a position. And part of what you get through a franchise agreement is insisting that it's in a choice location at the kind of the bottom of the dial. So you don't have to search for 10 minutes to find it, if you will. And back in the day, they often would outfit and create for the first time the ability to produce content. They had provided a lot of equipment, and I'm sure we benefited here as well. We've long since replaced all that with more modern equipment, of course.
Okay. So the only comment I'll have is that in terms of volume and priority, this does not seem like a super top priority. However, the work is done and it does seem like it's something we could action. So I'd like to get some suggestions from the committee in terms of what you would like to see in terms of process and timing. Next steps.
I think if the town manager has his pulse on the other communities that have gone through this process, and some of the neighboring communities that we know are similar to ours seem like this is breezing through, I have no problems bringing this to the council at maybe not the next meeting, maybe let him sit on it for, do a.
Yeah, or one option would be to bring it in first reading and let it soak for a little bit, that we don't move immediately to public hearing and second reading to get some public input, get some eyes on it. I would like to start the process of adoption if we could, to get it done in the end of the first quarter this year.
Yeah, I personally don't have an issue with it.
All right.
I support that too. I support doing that.
Great. So one thing that I know we'll do as a matter of course is you get the one pager on that for this as an agenda item that outlines sort of how it got here and why it's here and why we, are dealing with it. So we'll look for that.
And if you like, we could do some communication around it too, to maybe a leader article to, provide the backdrop and then we could have some public input in the meantime.
Great.
Phil,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can I ask Phil one quick question to do with this?
Go ahead.
Phil, have we heard anything from the franchisees on this? Have you heard anything from any of the lobbyists or?
I have not.
Okay, all right, just
And
curious.
I don't know if they commented, since it was a GP cog project. I don't know if
Right.
they solicited or received comments or not, but
They're well aware. I believe Bradley Law, I don't think consulted with them, but they're in touch with them.
Okay.
In large part to start lining things up to renegotiate franchise agreements, but they're certainly aware of this effort.
Okay.
Right, I was just curious because you know how it is. Sometimes you come up with something and then all of a sudden people come out of the walls, including other lawyers and whatever. So I was just curious. All right.
So the only question I had is there anything that needs to be done in terms of editing or redlining or whatever between now and when the
I had a few. I did have a few. Yeah, it's partly because some of the, if you take a look at it, there are notes in here, and it's just a reference. And it wasn't clear to me whether, and I actually didn't speak to Mr. Bradley, but whether he intended these notes to be in there, or they're just a reference point for readers.
Why don't we do this, if you will? I'll work with Phil. We'll clean it up. We'll provide a red line to the extent we need to, or at least clean up. I don't think comments serve a purpose in there, and we'll bring a final draft to you at your next meeting, and hopefully you'll be in a position moving along to council.
Great.
Does that work?
Great.
Yeah.
So do we need to do that in form of an action item? Can I get a motion that summarizes that as a step? So we can put it in.
I mean, I would be okay with a red line version, go straight to council.
Okay.
I guess that would be my only discussion
Yeah.
point, because I trust Phil's gonna make the edits, and I don't know if we want to put this on the agenda and do this all over again, so.
Yeah, I don't see any need to put it back. Let's just, make a motion that we move a red line version to council.
Can I take that as a motion then?
That's in the form of a motion.
Thank you. You do that so easily.
And I'll give it a smooth second.
Okay.
Council Johnson,
Yes.
Council Katarina.
Yes.
Hemo.
Yes.
Thank you.
So thanks very much. And we'll, put that on the nightstand next to expectations. guaranteed to help you get to sleep. So the second, one thing I was going to ask, is there any public comment on this item? So I don't see or hear any. So we'll move right along to the next item, which is manufactured homes and housing. Thank you. And Jay Chase is here along with Brian Longstaff. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. We know you've been busy.
Yes.
It's the understatement, of the world. Lead us off, Jay.
Sure. Yep. So this conversation is really pinging off the conversation we had last month, where at that time Phil sort of introduced, at least at a policy level, what we're trying to do. And just to recap, we have a fairly antiquated Chapter 500 called Ordinance around trailers and trailer camps. Is originally written in the 40s, has had some touch to it, but not a whole lot. And so really the effort here is to modernize our existing ordinance and licensing process to be in line with really what the town's been doing for the last couple of decades, and then to update the language around manufactured homes and mobile home parks consistent with state statute. So I know the packet was pretty thick. You had 5 exhibits, but really just trying to demonstrate everything that was going on. And so really with Phil's help, what we've done is we've taken the relevant provisions of Chapter 500 and broken it into really 2 different areas. We've drafted, and you have in your packet, a proposed new licensing ordinance. I think it's would be Chapter 1019, that really just simplifies and codifies the licensing process that we do for mobile home parks. The other component to this is really around the land use components and taking those provisions of the antiquated Chapter 500 and moving those into Chapter 405, which is our zoning ordinance, the ordinance that governs land use in the community. And so a couple of things we just want to point out in there. What some of the things you might notice from Chapter 500, there's a host of performance standards that are frankly, outdated, some inconsistent with state law, and others that are more adequately addressed by newer ordinances that have come in place since the 40s, be that building codes, site plan review ordinance, as well as state regulations around sanitary and adequate water supply and those sorts of things. So those are a couple of things that you'll see. And really, I think we tried to do a very light touch on policy. As I noted, we're updating definitions, but really bringing those consistent with what's in state statute. Really, the 2 areas of policy that, I just want to flag, and we'll certainly can have any amount of conversation you wish around. In Chapter 500, there's provisions around buffering standards. Really talks about, 300 feet from certain properties or uses. And that's just completely inconsistent with what the state allows. As drafted, we're suggesting, or as drafted, the language right now would just say any unit within a mobile home park needs to meet the setbacks of the underlying zoning. Essentially think 15 feet for side and rear setback. Just want to bring to your attention that the state would allow an up to 50-foot setback. And so, whatever your policy thoughts are, that we would appreciate. And then the other thing that actually Brian Longstaff, our zoning administrator, identified was we have a provision in our ordinance around special, it's called the special permit, which allows a mobile home to replace an existing dwelling if the existing dwelling is inhabitable, found to be inhabitable. That provision actually says, if the person who moved into that mobile home initially, they can't pass it along to their heirs. And so the question is, is that an area we might want to look at? We don't actually, I guess Brian and I were talking, we can't really recall this ever coming up. But as we looked at the language, we said, well, is that really still the policy direction the town's interested in only allowing the first person to utilize that? So I think I'll stop there, and I'll see Phil or Brian if you have anything you want to add, but I sort of try to set the stage, and we're happy to answer questions as we go.
So I don't have much to add. That was a good overview. You heard my sort of legal overview last time in terms of what we're allowed to do, not allowed to do. We really did, the one thing I would reiterate is this was really just trying to clean up and not change the policy. So for people who are wondering what this does, it just, we made sure the definitions were updated. We put the parts of the ordinance that were not in the right place in the right place. So some were zoning related, some were licensing related. And that's essentially it. Other than the two areas I think that we recognize do require council input from a policy perspective. And that's the setback from the outside zoning lines and this sort of continuation of what would be a legally non-conforming mobile home. But otherwise, no real substantive change from the existing.
So I want to make sure that we speak to the specific issues, a special permit, and also Tina and Teresa had raised questions about some of the wording. There's still mobile home wording in here, even though we don't refer to them as mobile homes anymore. So it says mobile home park. So so those are 2 or 3 specific things I would like us to touch on, but before I forget, that's why I'm mentioning them now. But do you have any questions, Paul and Jean Marie, together or individually on this? Appreciate the work that's been done and makes a lot of sense. It's overdue.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it would be helpful for me to hear from the folks who are maybe affected by this ordinance.
Yes.
That was exactly what I was gonna say.
Right.
So if
Well,
we
why don't
go
we ahead and do that. And have
Exactly,
the public comment now from Tina
Yeah.
and Teresa. Feel free to, walk to the podium and welcome this evening, and we look forward to your remarks.
I don't know what to do with those, so I'll try to speak louder. Thank you all for inviting us to be here tonight. My name is Teresa DeFossis. I'm president of State Manufactured Homes. Together with my family, Tina Marie Smith, her husband Gordon Smith, my grandson Jake Smith, we're all here tonight, and our attorney Alan Beagle is here also. My entire career has been in the manufactured housing industry. From the days of trailers and trailer parks to the present manufactured homes and manufactured housing communities. In the early days of our industry, the production of trailers took place in factories, but I can't see too well, but were not constructed to any federal or state building standards. The early industry grew up by providing homes for people involved in the war effort, and after to providing housing for the many GIs returning from the war that needed a place to live with their families. Even then, we were communities. We were neighborhoods. During those early years, the stigma attached to trailers and house car trailer camps, as you so nicely call it in Scarborough, was acceptable and prevalent in both government regulations and the attitude of many of its citizens. To be called trailer trash was not unusual. Even today, it is not unusual to read in the newspaper or hear on TV, person dies in trailer or in mobile home park. What image pops into your mind? A dilapidated trailer in a trailer park, or a teacher, firefighter, or government official passing away in their home? In the early 1960s, the industry concluded that minimum building standards were needed. At that time, the ANSI code was adopted and did not solve the problem of building homes in a factory that were sent to places around the country, but had no mandated building standards that were acceptable in all states. The really hard work began. All segments of the industry, manufacturers, dealers, community owners, developers, government representatives, and of course, a contingency of lawyers, agreed on building performance standards and a government agency that would develop and supervise the implementation of these standards. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development became the federal agency, and the HUD code was implemented on June 15th of 1976. I had the honor of serving several years on the National Manufactured Housing Consensus Committee in the 1990s that is responsible for updating and implementing new performance standards for all segments of our industry. The process of building a home in a factory is well controlled by HUD. The design and plans for the home are approved by an outside engineering company approved by HUD. Quality control in the production process is approved by HUD. At a manufactured housing factory, Not only are there quality control inspectors whose only job is inspecting the home during production, but HUD requires that an outside inspector from a licensed third-party agency inspect each home being built to certify that the home complies with the HUD code and the approved plans for that home. In addition, HUD inspectors can go to a plant at any time and do an audit of the process and compliance with the requirements. A HUD seal is affixed to the home and the delivery is scheduled. That would be the red seal that's on the back of each segment of a manufactured house. When the home arrives, the installation on the site takes place. The Manufactured Housing Board of Maine is authorized by HUD to act as its agent to set the requirements for the installation. Each lot in a manufactured housing community, as well as the community itself, has to meet the requirements set by the State of Maine Manufactured Housing Board. The requirements cover the design and construction of the community from lot size to road construction. They include the gravel under the cement slab, the blocking under the home, the water, sewer, and electrical utilities. Because of the federal laws and the state of Maine laws and regulations cover all of these requirements, as well as others not listed, the towns can only inspect the connections from the home to the on-site utility. The design and construction of garages are included in the federal and state regulations and are also inspected by a third-party agency. In 1977, the state of Maine, under Chapter 10, Section 9001, established a Manufactured Housing Board. This regulatory board is responsible for the following: to provide protection to the public against hazards from poorly constructed or installed manufactured housing, to provide and enforce with respects to its licenses, and political subdivisions, uniform performance standard for the construction and installation of manufactured housing, and ensure durability and safety, to eliminate all costly duplicative regulations, and to adopt rules that provide for the performance necessary to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing at prices that people of this state can afford, and to establish regulations that govern those matters within the state. Number D, to establish an administrative board for the purpose of administering and enforcing this chapter and applicable warranties. E, to require this board to assume responsibilities as consistent with this chapter, including the enforcement of the provisions of the chapter and administrative and enforcement of rules, investigates of complaints, and any other acts that are consistent with the purposes of this chapter. To have this board in the administration of this chapter give consideration to its economic factors that may result in additional cost to home buyers and eliminate any unnecessary costs that may occur from the enforcement of this chapter or any other act. And to grant to this board the investigative and regulatory powers it may reasonably require to accomplish the foregoing purposes and intent, and to carry out the provisions of this chapter, including making decisions in accordance with the Maine Administrative Procedures Act. The Manufactured Housing Board regulates all factors of our industry, including the construction of the homes, the installation of the homes, the warranties and construction requirements of manufactured housing communities. We are licensed by the state of Maine for the operation of manufactured housing communities. The construction of communities is governed by the state. The installation of homes is under the jurisdiction of the Manufactured Housing Board. During over 50 years in this dynamic industry, not only did I serve on the Federal Consensus Committee, but I was also involved in committees that helped craft the standards for the State of Maine Manufactured Housing Board, and I continue to serve on that board. I also was involved in the production of both HUD Code and modular homes as president of Burlington Homes for over 15 years. Contrary to a statement made during your last meetings, our homes do not depreciate. We provide non-subsidized affordable housing in very desirable neighborhoods. Our residents are just like residents in other homes. Lawyers, firefighters, police officers, teachers, mechanics, business owners, homemakers, mothers, fathers, grandparents, someone's children, and even a public works director. Maybe you have never visited Hillcrest. Pinecrest, or a factory-built home. We invite you to our communities and to see a modern home that just happens to be built in a factory. As you consider the licensing of manufactured housing communities, it is important that you realize we are the only housing or housing communities to be licensed by the town of Scarborough. Do you want to continue discriminating because our homes and our communities are built in a factory? We will be happy to meet with you to discuss the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance, since our companies will be directly affected. I've also, with my nice family members, will provide you with a book that gives you all the laws pertaining to manufactured housing in the state of Maine. Some of the laws were not quoted in what you did, Mr. Attorney. So perhaps you didn't know that there were that many pertaining to manufactured housing. So we'll be glad to give you that book, and thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement, and we know you put a lot of time and effort into preparing that and sharing that with us. There's a lot of information there that I certainly didn't know, and we benefit from that. It's very helpful context for this work, so thank you. One thing I'd also like to offer, we don't do this very often, but if you'd like, we'd be happy to have your written statement included as part of the minutes, and also have that go forward to the council.
Thank you very much.
Great, good. With that, though, I'd like to make sure that we're going to address the specific issues that were raised, and then we can talk a little bit about process and timing. And I think there were 2 or 3 of them. One was the special permit. The other one was some of the wording that still appears to be a little bit out of sync. So, Phil, do you want to try to help us with that, leading
Sure.
through that?
Yeah, and thank you. And thank you for the comments. Yeah, there are other statutes clearly that I'm familiar with the regulation of manufactured housing. What's important for municipalities, however, is there's a municipal statute entitled 30A, which governs how municipalities can regulate. And that's what we've been concentrating on. It's important to note, based on those comments, that your ordinances do not regulate the construction of manufactured housing. That is not what these do, and this does not make any change from the current practice. So I want to make that clear.
And I guess as we don't want to get into the.
No, and these do not. These do not. This is your ordinances today speak really to public health safety issues. It's written a long time ago, 1940s roughly. Does require licensing of parks, and that you are allowed to do that, and many municipalities do that. It's a policy decision for the town whether you want to or not. But it does not, and I want to be clear about this, does not get involved in the construction review of the construction or building permit or anything like that. The commentator was absolutely correct that that's under the jurisdiction of the state board, and there are other provisions in the building code statutes and other statutes that take care of that. So that is not what your ordinance does. One of your questions was the use of the term mobile home park in specific. That's because that's actually what the state refers to it as. So in state law, again, it's Title 30A 4358. I'll leave a copy of this back with, I know we've been living with the statute as you go through this, but mobile home parks are specifically defined in state law. And that section also includes a section called regulation of mobile home parks. So, and what it does is it governs, this subsection governs the municipality's regulation of mobile home parks. And really what it does is it limits our regulation. So it says municipalities cannot, for example, require the size of a mobile home park lot to be larger than any of the smallest spaces in town. There's provisions about subsurface wastewater requirements in terms of, well, there's a number of provisions I went over last time, but it's really a limit on our home rule authority to regulate mobile home parks. And so we have to make sure that we're not going beyond that.
I see.
And that's really what so it continues to use that word.
Okay.
The other place that uses the word, you may remember I reviewed this last time, is the definition of manufactured housing includes 2 subsets of manufactured housing. So subsection 1 is actually called, or they say specifically commonly called, newer mobile homes. That's the term the statute uses. So newer mobile homes, and those are those units constructed after June 15, 1976, in compliance with the HUD standards. And then the second category of manufactured housing are what people commonly call modular homes, and that's in quotes in the statute. So there's 2 different types of manufactured housing in this statute. And the statute applies to both types. but there are a couple differences. One is that mobile homes or manufactured housing in general has to be allowed in a number of places throughout a community. But then specifically, notwithstanding that, so in other words, not every district, they don't have to be allowed in every district, but they do have to be allowed in a number of locations on undeveloped lots where single family dwellings are allowed. But notwithstanding that, there's an exception for modular homes, and modular homes, which meet the standards, must be allowed in every zone where single family homes are allowed. So that's another distinction that the statute makes between newer mobile homes and modular homes. So that's why that term is in your ordinances, because it's in the state law.
Okay. And there's a couple of questions here, so at least we'll give them a chance to have some input. Tina and Teresa, go ahead.
You want me to say something?
Yeah. Whatever order you prefer.
I'm Tina Marie Smith. I'm from State Manufactured Homes in Scarborough. I'm also the president of the Manufactured Housing Association of Maine. We represent 536 manufactured housing communities and retail sales centers. I just want you guys, I've lived in Scarborough my entire life. I want you guys to know that because Scarborough is really on the forefront of we're thought of as a progressive town, the language is changing and it will change at the state level too. So while we rewrite this ordinance, it would make a lot of sense to call it a manufactured housing community, especially with the quality of the 3 communities that we have in this town. I know that Crystal Springs was not as great as it should have been, but the new owners are really trying, and our communities are really, we're nationally recognized manufactured housing communities. People come from all over the country to see our communities and to see how we have built a community of people that are neighbors and friends, and we have a lovely bunch of people there. So I would suggest that manufactured housing would be the terminology to use, even though the state laws state mobile home parks. We are working on that at a legislative level to change all of that. It takes years to get anything changed at the State House, but my mom and I are always there testifying. And as soon as we can get that changed, we will. And I wonder if I can answer any questions while I'm up here, because I'm not a great speaker, but I would like to help out if I could.
Paul, I don't know, Paul or
Yeah,
Jean Marie, if you'd like to.
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
So I'm gonna ping pong a little bit, but
Sure.
yeah, so but Tina, hang out for 1 second.
Okay.
Phil, is there a downside to making Tina's suggestion and then reference that it's referenced? Because I understand our language should be the same. So forget about everything else, right? Our
Sure.
language should be the same as state statute. That makes sense. Is there any drawback to using the more up-to-date language in our ordinance?
No, not necessarily. I would just, if you were to do that, what I would do is essentially define manufactured housing park
Yeah.
as
As,
refer to the state law,
Yes.
just so there's no
Yeah.
confusion.
okay,
And you could reference it
yeah,
even,
yeah.
like that would be, and we've brought a copy of all the statutes so
Okay.
that you can see
Okay.
some.
Yeah,
It
so you could
doesn't,
kind of refer back and
yeah, it
incorporate
doesn't always agree with each other.
okay, so that was question number 1. Thank you.
Yeah.
Question number 2 is, I just want to be really clear, right? Because
Sure.
we're trying to work, we're
Yes.
literally doing this because of you guys,
Yeah,
right?
we
So
really
there-
appre-
so there's certainly no 2 sides to this, to figuring this out.
We appreciate that
Yeah.
because we have no reason not to be allowed to be near schools and churches and.
So
yeah.
of the 5 exhibits that.
Yeah.
Do you guys have, so there's one very specific issue you have, right? Which I think is easily addressed.
Yes.
Is
yeah.
there any specific thing that you take issue with anything else of the 5 exhibits that we've been looking over?
My very astute attorney is heading to the podium to handle that.
just want to get.
Just a few things, but
Okay.
they're really, we'd love to work together in a workshop
that's
or
cool.
something
Yep,
to do
yep.
that.
But I just want to try to focus on what's sitting in front of us and your direct feedback from it. That's all. So.
My name's Alan Beagle, and I represent the State Manufactured Homes. The family has asked that I come today. I just learned of the workshop tonight and everything last week when Jay sent over to Teresa. I didn't actually learn it then, but they sent over the exhibits and the thing. And so we what I would really suggest, we sat down this past weekend and went through Phil's draft. And besides changing the terminology, there were quite a number of points. There are things that we really think should be amended to be consistent with the practice of the manufactured home communities. And I would just, I was going to prepare that for tonight, but it's not fair dumping something on you immediately. And I would be glad to prepare that, kind of do have it prepared, but and distribute it so that you could study it. And then I would suggest you, whoever the appropriate persons are, meet with the family and Bill and me, or whoever the town thinks are the appropriate people to do that. The one point that I wanted to raise that I'd be glad to have Phil research and speak to, but is what we call in the law preemption. And preemption is the policy, or the legal policy, actually, I guess is a way of saying it, the legal principle that the laws of the higher federal government control over the laws and take the place of state. The similar policy applies to with respect to state policies or state law with respect to municipal ordinances. And there is a provision in, I think it's 4587 or whatever the statute, the zoning, that says the town can make restrictions that are less restrictive than the state statute. But my real concern, and I think it would make it a lot easier in terms of further discussions, is that I don't think the town, and I think Phil said something earlier tonight, and I'll be glad to look, but I don't, when the state, as it has, as Teresa explained, as Phil has laid out and this binder shows, the state has extensively over the last, I can't say 45 or whenever the camping on trailer ordinance was passed, has really, particularly in the last 20 years, extensively gone into at the HUD, at the federal level, and also at the state level, as you can see, governing and making the laws controlling manufactured housing complete and quite extensive. And I think I think in fact that since the state of Maine has done that, it has, and I think it's Title 10, Section 2021, or it's given all of the powers to the because of their expertise to the Manufactured Housing Board, and that one of the powers that it is given to the board is the licensing power. And in fact, communities, manufactured housing communities, which is actually the section of the statutes, there's a subsection of Title 10. Manufactured housing communities are required to have a state license, and the reasons for that, and the requirements for the license and all the rules. I think maybe the binder has some of the rules that the Manufactured Housing Board has established. They're extensive, and so my point is, I think legally that the state has preempted the power to license the manufactured housing. And that doesn't mean that there are certain things that in here, like the names and addresses and all of the lots where the homes are located. So for taxation purposes, there certainly should be included in any ordinance, in an ordinance that addresses manufactured housing. But I don't think I think the subject matter has been preempted by the state of Maine, and many of the suggested changes we make in the version that I'll submit to you for consideration try to address some of the inconsistencies or that aspect of it. Frankly, I don't think. I think the appropriate action would be to repeal Chapter 500 There's no question that is antiquated. But the question is, does the town of Scarborough really need to have anything more than have a licensing of manufactured home statutes? I don't think it has the power to do that, first of all. And secondly, I think it only gets, you're just saying anything more than you have to comply with the rules and the regulations of the Manufactured Housing Board. Just is about what you need, if in fact anything is appropriate. So those are my comments. And the other thing is that, and I don't have parents that live in manufactured housing, but I've certainly become familiar with representing state manufactured homes, and that the terminology, as Teresa mentioned, the terminology that have been used for years makes a difference. Makes a difference to the way people view the residents of manufactured home communities, and it makes a difference. The word park, I mean, rather than community. Just as an example, I think that's really important as terminology in our society today is important for exactly the same type of reasons. Forms our views on how we look at things. Anyway, that's all I have to say now, and I hope to be able to work with you and Phil and everybody else to go through this. Thank you.
It's clear you have a lot of subject matter knowledge, as operators.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, I have some questions that
Yeah, go ahead.
for the previous speaker.
Yes, go right ahead.
Could you explain to me, because mobile homes or manufactured homes or whatever you want to call them.
Let's call them manufactured housing.
And there are two types of manufactured housing. As you know, there's, at least in real estate, we call it mobile home and modular. And I believe we're following state statute on that. But that being said, would you agree that the homes that are at Hillcrest are personal property and not real estate?
I would agree under the taxation laws of the state of Maine, they are, yes.
Okay,
They are not real estate, that the homes themselves are not real estate.
that's correct. Okay. So, and I think that's all I had for you, Mr. Beagle, but I think that we're sort of we're going all over the place here with, and I appreciate the comments of Mrs. DeFoss and Ms. Smith regarding this, but basically what we're looking at with the changing of this ordinance is the way I'm looking at it anyway, personally, is, it's like zoning. We're looking at the zoning. We're not looking at the quality of the homes. We're not looking at, anything that's regulated by the feds or the state in regards to quality of homes. What we are looking at is, I guess, zoning, for lack of a better word. And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't like the fact that we tax the personal property. Is that correct?
No, that's not what we're saying at all.
Okay, then I'm misunderstanding you.
And at this point, I want to make sure we're going to try to circle the wagons here in a minute.
Okay,
and try to
I'll just
go
make it
forward.
really,
Go ahead.
make my point really quick. I would like Jean Marie Katerina to know that we have manufactured homes as well as modular homes in our
Yep.
community.
Yeah,
In-
you've got the
No,
the
no.
modulars down back, right?
See, that's what I want to correct you about. You,
Okay.
as a realtor, can't even tell the difference. And that's why,
Well, I
that's my
can,
job.
but that's all right.
How can you? Because if you think all 175 of those homes are manufactured homes, they are not.
No,
And- or
I
if you-
know, but
Or
that's.
if you think they're all modular homes, the only difference is there's a seal underneath the
Right.
home and the
Correct.
frame stays in place. Other than that, it's 2x6 construction. There's 16 on center, 2x10 floor joists, also 16 on center. Very well constructed homes that we quite frankly have, in the past year, people that are sitting in this room have said to me, I've called it a trailer and I'm always going to call it a trailer. So I just want you to know the type of why we meet this with such
Right.
resistance is we'd like the terminology to change as
Right.
the time change and
And
the
I,
product
and I agree,
changes.
and I don't disagree with you on that, okay?
Okay,
And I agree, that the
no.
things should be, that's why I'm saying we aren't talking about the quality or construction. We're talking about, it seems to me, two things. One is, the zoning and what we have to do in the ordinances. And we do have to change that wording. It's crazy because it's old, it's ancient. But it's come up before, which is the licensing.
yeah.
And frankly, from my own point of view, I think it's okay to license them because it is personal property. Like we license cars, we can license.
Right.
those,
We,
but
we,
that's my
rep-
opinion.
we represent the people. There's about 800 or so people in this town that live in manufactured housing that think that they're homes. So that's why we would like them to be referred to as homes.
Thank you.
Manufactured homes.
Yeah, okay, but I'm just getting into the legal technicality, but that's it. That's all.
The other reason, Ms. Katerina, as part of the licensing, the only thing you're licensing is our right to operate this community. You're not licensing the individual homes. You're not doing anything of the sort. So when you claim that that's your agenda, is to, to have some control over not the construction, but the community. What do you need control of? The fact that we have housing, what do we do wrong? We're just like any other community in this town. The only difference is we do everything. We own the streets, we maintain the streets, we plow, we pick up the trash, we do all of that. The town of Scarborough has absolutely nothing to do with us other than to collect taxes. You collect taxes from us, you collect taxes on every individual home.
Right.
So please just treat us the way you treat every other house. If you want to
Okay.
license us and discriminate, then we'll fight that on the discrimination thing.
Thank you. I think we've had a very
Yeah.
full and wide-ranging
That's fine.
discussion of this. Thanks, Jean Marie. At this point, I want to try to get us on a go-forward mode here. So what I'd like to do is to ask for a motion that would give us the opportunity to take another turn of the language, to do what we can in terms of further liberalizing the language and making that more current, as well as getting the other things up to date. So, but I think it would require a turn. And we've heard the feedback that's gone, into some depth and also maybe a little bit farther than what we had expected, but we'll take that under consideration. But I think we'll go as far as we can in terms of what we discussed so far, and then we'll do another iteration of this. We welcome the input from the folks who are here this evening, and we'll look forward to seeing that again before going to the council. I think we would do one turn on this, one more turn in committee, or you feel we can get this ready to go on one turn directly to the
Well, I think we
council?
need at least one more here.
Yeah.
See where we are.
Yeah. So let's do that. Let's
Yeah.
take one more pass at this, and appreciate everybody taking the time to go into some depth on it. And Phil, we'll turn to you for that. Jay or Brian, or if you have any further questions, further comments.
Yeah, I just have a question process related. I heard the DeFossis and their attorney mention that they might be preparing some language or some comments. Would you like that to be provided to staff? Staff
Yes.
take a look at it?
Yes.
We'd of course provide that to you, but we'd sort of take a cut at it, bring something forward to you so you can sort of have both pieces together. And so that may mean with your next meeting being March 17th, it may mean we're looking at April. I just don't want to
Yeah.
set unreasonable. I want to be sure we're all thinking the same timeframes. Maybe we can come back.
Since 1944.
Don, can I?
So
Can I make let's revise that. Let's have a meet with staff and me, because I think we need one of us in these preliminary conversations,
Yeah.
right? I guess the only thing, I just want to reiterate to all you guys, we're trying to work with you. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're trying to make progress. Let's not go to war. Me and Jay will meet with your attorney and one of you guys, and we'll find a common ground before we get back here. And then that way when we don't get distracted. Okay, so, and that way you'll have one elected official, one staff member, your attorney, 2 of you, 3 of you, it doesn't matter. And then we'll work towards a solution.
So
Does that sound good? Okay, cool. Let's just do that.
So let's get a motion to that effect to try to do that by the time of the next meeting. And then from that next ordinance committee meeting, we'll go forward to the council after that. So can I have a motion?
I motion to do what I just said.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I second to do what he just said.
Yeah, what I said. Okay. Do I have a second?
Don't you just second.
Okay.
I said a second. I second
Okay.
whatever he just said.
Can we have a vote then?
Counselor Johnson.
Yes.
Counselor Katerina.
Yes.
Hamel.
Yes.
Perfect.
Sausage making.
Let's
at
set
its
it,
finest.
let's set it
Thank you.
up and we'll figure it out.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Hey, guys, thank you.
And the next agenda item is an exciting topic of electric vehicle charging stations. So, and this is what's great about this
Mr.
work is that,
Chair,
yeah, you
I'm
want to take a
sorry.
break?
It's, no, I have a fast stop at 7. I have to leave at 7 because I have
Well,
another appointment at 7:15.
We're gonna be quick like a bunny and move through this. We'll be well by seven.
Just so you'll know.
You know, we'll be having dinner, be home having dinner by 7. Thanks, Phil. Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Jay again and Jamie Fish, who we've been spending a lot of time with lately on business. So
Keep mentioning
thanks
that.
again. It's becoming, yeah, it's like old home week.
Right?
It's all good. Jay and Jamie, welcome.
This is all Jamie. I'm just here for moral
Yeah, he's here
support.
for moral
Jamie and
support.
Jay, welcome.
You'll get him, Jamie.
I'm gonna share my screen, hopefully.
I need some water. Okay. Oh, all right. I'm thirsty, but I'll get.
Do you mind? Yeah.
I'm not trying to get you.
To get me out of here? No, I-
Yeah, we're just gonna take a bit of a pause here for a minute
Can
or
I
two.
just get a little clarification on that motion?
Yes.
Please.
Motion that staff and an elected official will meet with the stakeholders and come back with a revised plan no later than 2 meetings from now.
Okay, thank you. I
Yep.
appreciate that.
Yep.
Yeah, ideally, I'd like to see it at the next
Me
meeting.
too. Me
And
too.
then we'll go to the council after that.
I agree. I would like the
Get
quicker
everything
this,
approved.
yeah, totally agree. So let's say for the next meeting.
I'll let Jay know that we just moved this timeline up a month.
Yeah, he'll be thrilled. Yeah.
Jay stepped out for 30 seconds.
Yeah, we're on a bit of a hiatus here, so please bear with us. We turn on music if they had it or cable TV if we had that too, but we'll just have to bear with us.
Let me know when you're ready. I can
Okay,
jump
Actually,
anytime.
we can just, she can start.
you
Yeah,
can start.
I don't
I think
need
Jay
Jay.
can caught up on all this. Go ahead, Jamie. Thank
All
you.
right, so I'm here this evening to share kind of an effort that the Sustainability Committee has been working on and to get your all input on the kind of the policy direction so that there's some understanding moving forward. So we're talking this evening about updating our town ordinances to require electric vehicle charging in both residential and commercial development. And to give a little bit of background for why we're doing this, it's a local, state, and national priority. So in our comprehensive plan, it calls out increasing energy conservation and efficiency. And the town has adopted a comprehensive energy and sustainability plan that aims, one of the aims is to reduce vehicle emissions where possible through diverse measures. And I'll note that the plan was put together before EVs kind of started gaining momentum. So we don't necessarily define what diverse measures are. But in this case, we're going to talk about EV charging. The Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan has called for increasing the number of electric vehicles on the road, specifically looking at 41,000 just 3 years from now, and looking at over 200,000 by 2030. Those are lofty goals, and to meet those goals, we need to have the charging infrastructure in place. So it will help encourage people to adopt electric vehicles. And in the 2021 infrastructure bill, there was $7.5 billion called out for EV charging infrastructure. And the goal was to have 500,000 EV charging stations throughout the country by 2030. So we're working on this. It's a priority on many levels. And then the car companies are following suit as well. So a lot of experts are anticipating price parity with gas-powered vehicles by 2025. And the number of EVs available from car manufacturers are expected to triple by the same year. And then a number of companies are pledging to go all electric. They're outlined on the screen there. Various timelines as early as 2030, having our conventional car companies transition to full electric up through 2050 or so. So I want to go through just a few definitions with you all so you'll understand what I'm talking about. The thought of the sustainability committee is to have different levels of EV charging infrastructure. So starting out, we have EVCS. EVCS is electric vehicle charging station. I'm probably just going to call it EV because it's a mouthful. So EV capable means that parking lots or homes are built so that the electric conduit is already installed under the parking lot. And when the tenants or the owners decide that they want to install those chargers, they don't have to rip up their pavement in order to install the chargers. So that's what we call EV capable. EV ready means that the conduit is under the parking lot and the site has the necessary electrical capacity available to install those chargers. An EV installed means it's the conduit's there, the electricity is there, and there are actually charging stations in place. There are a number of levels or types of chargers. Level 2 chargers are the ones that we have here at Town Hall. They require a 240 volt circuit similar to our clothes dryer. And it takes a couple hours of charging in order to fill an entire battery to get maximum EV range. So we're looking at 18 to 28 miles of range per hour of charging. And then there's the level 3 chargers, also called DC fast chargers. And these will provide 3 to 20 miles of charging per minute, or 3 to 20 miles of range per minute of charging. And so those require much larger electrical capacity in order to work. And so the committee has been putting some thought into what they would like to see in terms of requirements. So any new single or 2 family dwellings, they would like to see that it's 100% EV ready, where if a homeowner moves in and they have an electric vehicle, it's very easy for them to install their charger. So there wouldn't be a need for chargers to be already installed, but so that there wouldn't be a lot of retrofitting to go back and get the house ready for the installation of an EV charger. Multifamily dwellings, the thought was they want to see 100% of the indoor or covered parking prepared for EV installation. So that's what we're calling EV ready. Essentially the wires would be there. It would just be a matter of installing the chargers. And then with outdoor and surface parking, looking at breaking it up into the various categories. So having about 20% of the spaces with vehicle chargers installed, 30% that could be easily installed at a later date, and then 50% of the spaces would be able to be retrofitted into EV charging spaces. And there's a high percentage or a high focus on residential parking here because about 80% of electric vehicle owners charge at home. So we're seeing a paradigm shift from how we're used to fueling our vehicles. We're not going to necessarily drive to a specific location to charge. Most EV owners are charging at home overnight. That's how it's convenient. And then if they're not charging at home, they're going to places where they're already planning to be and not specifically trying to get to a location just to charge. And then taking a look at senior housing, this would be targeted at just the resident parking, not necessarily for the staff parking. And again, 10% of the parking spaces with vehicle charging stations installed, 20% to be easily retrofitted, and 70% capable to be retrofitted when the time came with additional electrical capacity and the chargers themselves.
Okay.
And then looking at public and commercial, I will say that the committee hosted a stakeholder meeting with commercial developers back in December and heard some feedback from them. And so the numbers that I'm showing tonight were scaled back from what was initially discussed with the commercial developers based on their feedback. So looking at large retail sales and service commercial entities, so specifically retailers that are greater than 25,000 square feet, looking at 5% of the spaces having electric vehicle charging stations installed, and then 10% being able to be installed at a later date, and an additional 10% being capable in the future. So for a total of 25% of their parking could be built out as EV chargers in the future. Small retail sales and service, the thought was there aren't as many, people aren't necessarily staying in these locations long enough to charge. So recognizing that spaces may turn over or maybe have different uses in the future. We're just looking for them to prepare for EV installation. So 5% EV ready and 20% EV capable. Health clubs are similar to the large retail sales and service locations because people tend to go to health clubs for at least an hour or more at a time. So thinking they're going to be there for longer. So having more charging requirements than a small retail sales and service. And then lodging establishments, thinking of people who are coming to Scarborough from out of town. There are increased requirements there and looking at in the future, potentially having 100% of their parking lot built out with EV chargers as adoption increases over time. And then all other commercial uses that don't fit into the categories spelled out would be similar to the small retail sales and service, 5% EV ready and 20% EV capable.
Can I ask you where you got these guidelines from and where do they flow from?
Yeah, so the Greater Portland Council of Governments and Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission have put together a readiness toolbox for municipalities. And so some of the information came from there. Some came from looking at what other areas around the country are doing.
Yep.
And then these categories are largely based on our existing off-street parking requirements in our zoning. So kind of building off what's already established in terms of the parking requirements.
Okay. It seems like a lot, and it seems like a lot of detail, a lot of specifics. So can you help us with timing on this and sort of what so you've got these ideas and you had a shareholder or stakeholder meeting. So what's your sense on timing and next steps for things like this?
So I know from the perspective of the sustainability committee, they want this to move forward as quickly as possible, just because of the amount of development that is coming and the amount of development that has happened over the past several years. They feel like we've already missed the boat, so to speak. So, but recognizing that things don't happen as quickly as possible and with things like this, especially where it is such a large change, I would say that we're looking for input from you all in terms of how long or how you want to either phase this in or move forward with this. And just one last note, we did want to recognize that people may not want to, they may rather pay a fee rather than installing EV chargers. So we are recommending in lieu fees that would then go towards the town installing EV charging in public areas throughout the town. So that's what I had to share. So I'm happy to, it is a lot. I agree.
It's a lot to digest. So let's just have some brief discussion about it. And Jay, you want to add to this?
Yeah, I was just going to offer, I think Jamie touched on it really. I think in terms of timing, we're really looking to you all at this point to move forward. I think, as Jamie said, the sustainability committee's worked on this for almost, 8 months, 8 to 12 months in different, speeds, starts and stops, what have you. I think the sustainability committee feels like, they're happy that it's now on your agenda and like to sort of see a policy direction from ordinance committee before we start drafting actual ordinance language. There's some model ordinances out there from which we'll take parts, and much like we did with the solar utility, or we just started with the manufactured housing, right? We started with the policy discussion, then we try to put some meat on the bones and then pull that apart too. So
I'd like to hear from Paul and Jean Marie, and then we'll kind of.
Well, great. I'd like to say something. Well, first, I don't think it's a little unfair because I feel like we're kind of at the end of the meeting and I think this deserves a little bit more of our attention. So let me just say that out of the gates, because I do know the sustainability committee's been working on this a ton. I know Jean Marie said she had mentioned she has a hard stop at 7, and this is a big deal to kind of rush through this. So
Absolutely.
I guess my first instinct would be to bump it to the next agenda, because my first initial instinct is I need to go home and sleep on this and talk to other people about it, because all I'm hearing is increased cost of housing right now. And I'm hearing there's plenty of other forces that, to your point, where can I wrap my brain around, am I requiring all this of retail and business when in reality, this is going to be part of the next generation of homes? And, so I have I just don't, I can't formulate an opinion. What I do know is I don't want to rush out of here and have a bad trajectory, one way or the other, because I need to sit and think about this.
Jean Marie, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I'm with Paul on that. I mean, I was obviously liaison to sustainability, say that fast 3 times. But I think there's a lot to digest here. I have concerns about requiring it in housing for the very reason Paul did. You know, when you add impact fees and you require this and you require that, you're making housing more expensive because it gets passed along. That's not to say that I wouldn't be in favor of it, but I just don't know enough. So I would be in favor of pushing this out again. You know, now it's been presented, so give us a chance to really look at it, talk to people and digest it, and then bring it back to the ordinance committee.
Yeah, what I'd suggest we do some kind of workshop, maybe we do a workshop in ordinance for this and open it to the public. And maybe ahead of time, you can share with us some, you talk about the toolkit and other resources you looked at. I know some folks will be early adopters and we want to dive into that. So we need to give time to people to do that. So what I'd like to say though, is that I think that we talk about cost of housing going up, the cost of electricity is going up. So, there's a little bit of a question of who's going to pay for all of this. And I will tell you, my bias in terms of buyout options or just impact fees, I'm not in favor of that.
Right, me either.
I think they need to put the infrastructure in. That's what we want them to do. So that's my 2 cents.
And Don, that was my instinct. Like, if we're gonna do it, I'm all done with the in lieu of fees, because we don't know how to.
I agree. I agree 100%. Because a developer is going to say, oh, that's easy, and just pay the fee, then I don't have to be bothered.
But we know you've done a lot of work on this. You're closer to it and deeper into it than anybody. So I'm eager to learn more, but it's just another world I know nothing about. So.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think it's smarter to have a workshop with the whole council?
Yes.
I feel like this issue is not small. And I think, would we be better served to know how 7 of us react versus the 3 of us?
We can't be the charging station for the council, stop it. So let's use your analogy there.
I'm just throwing that out there. Because I just feel like with 7 different people, I think this is a pretty major policy decision.
Yeah.
I don't know if this would be dead in the water or received it with open arms. I literally don't know. So,
well, nothing's dead in the water. You're just getting a fee.
all fair. Yeah.
And then if it can always come back, just keep lobbying and working on it. But I agree that I think it needs to be a workshop with the council.
Would that be I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
would that be a joint workshop with the sustainability committee, or do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Bring the whole crowd.
I think we need to see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
One other thing I'd say, stakeholders, I have a bee in my bonnet on this, okay? When we're talking about stakeholders, that needs to be a comprehensive definition of stakeholders. And not to pick on anybody, but I understand that the stakeholder group that's used to study the possibility of a combined primary school are only people who have children in school. So I would suggest we need to take a broader view on things like this for people that are going to be using it, paying for it, looking at it, plugging and unplugging it. So that's my commercial for this evening. Thank you. So, and I did that one myself. Okay, I didn't even prompting on that. So, quick comment. Thank you very much, Jamie and Jay, and Tom and company, Liam.
So do you want to
chat a little? Yeah, we have a motion, please, on this.
Yeah, I move that we move this to a workshop with the full town council and sustainability committee within the next, I don't know, we want to say 4 weeks, 6 weeks?
Great, and we'll look to the chair and the vice chair to help us
Yeah.
with getting that in the queue. Great, do I have a second?
Yeah, I think so. I think I second that.
Okay.
I just don't know
I don't know.
timeline wise.
Yeah, that might.
We got a few things going
Yeah,
on.
knowing what your workshop schedule is.
Well, change
I
the
think
time.
Tom
I
just-
just
Tom just
I
won't
just
turn his back on
Use
us.
4 to 6 weeks as a general timeframe. that
General
could be longer,
timeframe.
Depending on
Timing to BD, okay?
TBD.
Do you want
Yeah,
to take a vote
whatever.
on that?
Best possible date.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katerina,
Yes,
Counselor Hamel,
Yes, And I just did a little postscript there, that the chair and the vice chair will tell us on the.
Yeah, they can figure it out. It's all for us to deal
We
with.
can
Let them
demand
deal with
it,
it. Right,
and
let
then-
these guys
Right.
figure
They
it
can
out.
laugh and walk away. So,
Yeah, right.
like we used to. So, next agenda items, please, and then we'll be out of here.
Is that it?
I think it's
Good,
done.
isn't it?
All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
I'm going to motion to adjourn.
Second,
Okay,
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
yes.
Counselor Hamel.
yes, and thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Have a great
And,
evening.
and,
Thanks, everyone.
and can I just wanted to say thank you for moving this meeting to later. That was very helpful to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I was
Right,
able to
thanks.
take a week of vacation in Florida thanks to that. So everybody,
Sure.
staff and everyone, thanks.